Adam.
Well, thanks, Brett. Hi, I'm here. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Well, thank you for agreeing to come on. I wish it was under happier circumstances, like the crossover movie of Firefly and Chuck. Maybe next time. All right.
Well, I think it's an appropriate time to celebrate the life of a significant and influential great American, in my opinion. You know, this is a guy who was a dear friend of mine, and his life was cut short way too early. I had just had dinner with him Tuesday night.
Oh, wow.
And a week or so before that, he had bought himself a Vespa scooter so that he could go zipping around town and navigate through the terrible traffic near the 405. And my last image of him was after that dinner. He was on his way to an appearance on Piers Morgan, and he was zipping away on his scooter, waving goodbye. And I ran across an article written by Pat Sajak that said basically the same thing, that he had run into Andrew at a UCLA baseball game. Andrew came, zipping up on his Vespa scooter and hung out for a couple of innings. Pat Zajak's kid, I guess, is a manager for the visiting team. They hung out and chatted for a while, and Pat said the last image of Andrew he saw was zipping away on his Vespa. So that's how I'll always remember the last image of my buddy on that little Vespa scooter that he loved so much.
Now, Adam, a lot of us activists, we lost a resource, a leader, an author, but you lost a friend, and it's got to hurt you a lot more than it hurts the activists like us out here.
Well, I was a great admirer of his, and I feel my heart is just breaking for the family. He's got 4 young kids, 11 and under, a beautiful wife, Susie, and family and friends that we're just all stunned. And but he was a funny guy. That's how you always want to remember him, as a funny and friendly, jovial guy that people didn't really get a sense of, and the media portrayal of him, at least the enemy, his enemies in the media would portray him as an angry guy, and he was an emotional guy about things that he cared about, and he would get angry about injustice, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's good to raise your voice against injustice. I thought that's what the media is there for, is to hold government injustice to account, and that's one of his great missions.
Now, Adam, we've seen some of the responses from the left today on Twitter and other places, and it's not necessarily kind. I'm sure you read the Rolling Stone piece. What do you think, being that Mr. Breitbart was a critic of a lot of the media, what will his legacy be? Will he be treated fairly?
I think he'll be judged ultimately on the fruits of his labor and the ground that he laid for young. Wow, sorry, I'm a little broken up. Young journalists out there, citizen journalists, who he encouraged and he inspired to continue to keep this country free, and I think that will be his lasting legacy. Beyond his beautiful family and kids, that there are people who say, yes, you can stand up and punch that bully back in the nose. It's okay, the proverbial bully in the nose. I did a movie called My Bodyguard when I first started out, and there's something to be said for pushing back against that sort of injustice and bullying. How else do you defeat it? You can't just bow down to it, and he didn't.
Yeah, certainly, and you can't run, because then the bully doesn't go away and just gets stronger. What would you say, in your opinion, was Andrew's most significant contribution, well, to the world, let's say, apart from his family, to the political world?
Again, the platform for citizen journalists that have an outlet. His blog site is a wonderful place for people with good stories or a good opinion, a turn of a hook in some story that gives them an outlet to tell a story that people wouldn't hear otherwise. And just the energy that he brought to a room. He was a lightning rod. People hated him. People loved him, but he always played. He was always a happy warrior, and he felt that it was good to be taking slack because you knew you were over the target. The old Air Force axiom, and he stood with that. He decided to take a stand for this country and his children and our children too. He doesn't want to see other people's children mired in debt for the rest of their lives, and he took a stand against it.
Now, was Andrew always a conservative?
No, he had an epiphany, and he's told this story many times, and it's in his book. I recommend anybody to read his book, Righteous Indignation. It tells his great story, and there are two chapters in particular, chapters 6 and 7, that really define what the battle is. It talks about cultural Marxism's origins and how it infiltrated government and media over the last century, and he really breaks it down in an easily understandable way. But I forgot what I was saying. What was your question again? Forgive me.
I was listening. Was he always a conservative? And the answer to that was no.
No, he had shifted around the Clarence Thomas hearings. He saw that, and he's taken a lot of flack for, I guess, quote unquote, celebrating Ted Kennedy's passing. There are a lot of people who are criticizing him for that, and you don't want to speak ill of the dead. But if there's one person who sort of got away with it, it was Ted Kennedy and Mary Jo Kopechne's. There was an injustice that I think Andrew felt always enraged about. But Andrew never would have. I don't think Andrew would have left someone at the bottom of a river, if that means anything.
When I interned in D.C. for only a few months, 13 years ago, I got a button that said Ted Kennedy for lifeguard. I wear that proudly.
Yeah.
So,
but then you just look at the hypocrisy of those that are criticizing him for that. That just turns right back around on them. So if they're, I don't know, the people who hated him are really not worth spending too much time on. He was a wonderful American and my friend, and we miss him a lot.
Well, and there are a lot of things you can legitimately hate somebody for. I'm not sure differing political opinions would fit that category. And anybody who dies at 43, awfully young, and leaves 4 young children and a wife behind, it's tough to imagine how anybody could celebrate that.
Well, if you look at what he was fighting, a totalitarian religion or crypto religion, if you will, those that were apostates or enemies to that religion must be silenced, and it's a shame that there are people who are like that, because on the right, his side, our side, we don't want to silence the opposition. We want them to have a megaphone. We want them to be heard. We want to engage in the arena of ideas, whereas they want to shut us down and silence. And that just tells you where we are.
Indeed. So where do you think the Breitbart empire, all of the big websites, where does that go from here?
Well, I've talked to some of my friends over there, and they're fighting on. They have big plans. I think they've got some plans for the website coming up, and I'm not really at liberty to discuss it, but they'll be doing it soon, I imagine. And so they onward and upward. They fight, and that's exactly what Andrew would want. Ever forward, continue the battle. It's a long struggle.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like when Apple lost Steve Jobs. You lose the guy on top who's kind of defined the mission and defined the product, and I can't imagine the difficulties there. One last question, Adam. What is your best memory of Andrew? You certainly don't have to answer if you don't want to.
My favorite memory of Andrew Breitbart is when he joined us on a ride to recovery ride in Texas. He came down for the last day, and he brought his son with him. At the time, he was 9, and he rode along with us. And he just embraced being there, and he was there the day President Bush came out and saw the soldiers off on the ride, and he shared in that experience. And to see his son looking up at him, going, "Yeah, this is my dad," and he gets to hang out with these guys. These are warriors, and I think that image of him with his son will be my favorite. He never seemed more happy. He was, away from all of the outside world and the phone and the text messaging and all that stuff. That was in the car while you're riding your bike, and he was a free spirit. His hair was blowing under that stupid helmet he had on, and he looked a little pudgy in his Lycra spandex, but boy was he happy that day.
All right, Adam, thanks for joining us,
Yes,
and I think it shows a lot about what kind of person you are, that your favorite memory was him was as a father and not not working. So
Absolutely.
You lost a friend. Our hearts go out to you, and we wish you the best of luck as you deal with this.
Thanks. Appreciate it, guys.
All right,
Take
thanks,
care.
Adam.
Ever forward. Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.